She stepped off the dusty bus, her boots hitting the ground with quiet strength. Her uniform was clean but not new, her cap pulled low over her eyes. Around her, other cadets whispered, some laughed softly. "She looks like she's never touched a weapon," someone muttered. "She's probably just admin support," another one added. She heard it all, but her face didn't change. Not even a little. Her name tag read Rye, just one word, nothing more. She walked straight to the check-in point, handed her papers without a single word. The officer took one glance at her file, gave her a room key and waved her on. Nobody asked where she came from, nobody cared to know. To them, she was just another new face among the fresh recruits, but Rye wasn't just another face. She moved differently, walked with calm but firm steps. She always looked straight ahead, never down, never around. Even when people bumped into her or shoved her in line, she never flinched. During the first drill, the trainer barked orders while others struggled to keep up. Rye followed every command like she'd done it before. 1,000 times she didn't make a sound, didn't try to stand out, but it was hard not to notice how smooth her movements were. How she dropped into a push-up like a machine. How she lifted the rifle and balanced it perfectly, without asking questions. At night, while others laughed, joked, or complained, Rye sat on her bed cleaning her boots. She didn't join conversations, but she listened. She always listened. Some cadets started calling her Robot Girl behind her back. "She never talks," said one. "She never messes up," said another. They didn't mean it as a compliment. They thought she was trying to act better than them. But Rye didn't act, she just was. She followed the rules, but not because she had to. She followed them because they were already a part of her. One evening during dinner, a young cadet named Arun spilled his tray. Food splashed on Rye's uniform. The room fell silent. Waiting for her reaction, she stood slowly, looked at him, then said softly, "You okay?" Arun nodded, confused. Rye picked up the tray and walked it to the bin. Her uniform stained, but her eyes calm. No anger, no complaint, no ego. It confused everyone. They were trained to react, to compete, to prove themselves. But Rye didn't play that game. She was quiet, but strong, soft, but sharp. And no one could figure her out. One night, a group of cadets sneaked out after curfew, laughing as they returned. They didn't expect to see Rye sitting outside the dorm, polishing her boots under a dim light. One of them teased her, "Do you sleep in that uniform too?" She looked up, and for the first time, she smiled slightly. "Sometimes," she said, then went back to work. The group stood silent for a second before walking away. Unsure if she was serious or joking, her presence began to create discomfort. Not because she was rude or proud, but because she showed what real discipline looked like, and it reminded others how far they still had to go. Instructors started noticing her too. They'd call her name for demonstrations. They'd ask her to help fix others' postures. Even though she was still just a cadet, it didn't make sense. Why did the top officers quietly nod when she walked by? Why did the sergeant major pause when he saw her name on the list? Whispers began. "She's not a normal cadet. She has to be someone important. Maybe she's a spy," someone joked. But no one dared ask her directly. Rye just kept training. Morning, afternoon, night. She ran faster than most, lifted more than expected, and never complained about pain. Even when her hands bled after a long march, she just wrapped them up and reported for duty. She earned no special rewards, no medals, no attention, and yet everyone's eyes followed her when she walked past. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why did she act like a soldier who'd already seen war? They didn't know it yet. But the answer would come loud and clear when someone shouted her forgotten name across the training field. And everything changed. But until then, she was just the girl in uniform. Silent, steady, and stronger than anyone could guess. The mess hall buzzed with noise every evening. Trays clattered, boots stomped, and laughter echoed from every corner. But tonight something was different. The laughter was nervous. The eyes were watchful. All because of her. Rye sat alone again. Her tray neatly placed in front of her, her back straight. Her eyes low, she ate slowly like a machine. Same order every night. Vegetables first, meat second, water last. It was the kind of order only soldiers stuck to, not new cadets a few tables away. Aaron leaned in and whispered to his friend Zoya, Did you see the way she handled the obstacle course today? Zoya nodded, biting her lip. She was faster than all of us. And she didn't even break a sweat, Ravi. The class joker leaned in from another table. She's not normal, I swear, he said with wide eyes. I saw her wake up at 4 a.m. before even the instructors. Just to do pull-ups in the dark, Zoya raised an eyebrow. Are you sure she's not special forces or something? Their voices were low, but not low enough. Rai heard every word. She didn't look up, didn't react. She just kept eating, calm and steady. Even the kitchen staff had started noticing her. One of the cooks whispered to another. She comes in quietly, always says thank you. Never takes extra food, the other cook nodded. Once I dropped a spoon and she caught it before it hit the floor. They both laughed nervously. Unsure if it was luck or training, instructors had begun talking too. But behind closed doors, Staff Sergeant Kapoor walked into the officer lounge holding a clipboard. She's marked top 3 in every drill, he said. But her file says she's a first-year recruit. Captain Neha frowned. That doesn't add up. Exactly, Kapoor replied, lowering his voice. I think we're training someone who doesn't need training. Meanwhile, back in the mess hall, the whispers kept growing. Some were curious, some jealous, others just scared. But no one dared speak to her directly. Rai was like a shadow, always present. Always silent, never known. That night, a group of cadets decided to test her. They waited until she finished eating and stood to leave. As she passed by, one of them accidentally bumped into her, making her tray fall. It clanged on the floor, rice and curry splashing across her boots. Everyone froze, waiting for her to explode, or at least complain, but Rai simply knelt, picked up the tray, cleaned the floor with a napkin, then looked up at the cadet with calm eyes and asked, Are you okay? The cadet stuttered, unsure how to respond. She nodded and walked away, leaving the hall in total silence. That moment spread through the base like wildfire. She didn't even get angry. She asked if he was okay. Who does that? Later that night in the dorm hallway, Arun peeked into her room. Her bed was perfectly made, boots lined up like soldiers. But what caught his eye was the photo by her bedside. A black and white picture of a group of Marines in full gear, standing in a desert, and there in the corner stood Rai, younger but with the same calm face, no smile, just strength. He stepped back quietly, his heart pounding. She wasn't just a cadet, she had a story. A big one. He didn't tell anyone about the photo. Something about it felt private, sacred, but it changed the way he saw her. Not as a mystery to solve, but as someone who had lived more than she let on. The next morning things felt different, people still whispered, but now with caution. Even respect, instructors stopped correcting her form. Instead, they started asking her to demonstrate. One asked her how she held her rifle so steady. She answered in 4 words. Exhale, grip, aim, wait. No extra talk. Just the truth. Every day the whispers grew. But now they weren't mocking. They were wondering, guessing, watching. Who was this woman who carried herself like she'd already seen war? Why did she never talk about her past? Why did the officers start nodding at her when they passed by? And then one evening, while returning from training, a young private whispered something that would spark a whole new level of curiosity. My uncle's in the Navy, he said. He heard the name Iron Wolf once. That's what they call a soldier who saved an entire unit in Afghanistan. They all turned toward Rai, walking ahead of them steady as ever. Could it be her? Was she the Iron Wolf? No one knew for sure, but one thing was clear. She was no ordinary cadet, and the whispers in the mess hall were only the beginning. The morning sun burned over the training field. The air was thick with dust and tension. The whistle blew, sharp and loud. Formation. Move! The instructor shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. The cadets ran to their positions, boots pounding in rhythm, sweat already dripping before the real test even began. It was the hardest drill of the month, the endurance gauntlet, a long run through mud, barbed wire, heat, and exhaustion. Most cadets dreaded it. But Rai stood calm, her eyes steady, her breathing even, as if she had done this her whole life. Beside her, Arun tried to hide his nerves. Hey, he whispered, you ready? She gave a small nod. No words, just focus. He didn't know why, but that nod gave him strength. The whistle blew again. and the cadets charged forward. Mud splashed, shouts echoed, and bodies strained under the weight of packs and rifles. The first obstacle was the crawl under barbed wire. Many hesitated, afraid of cuts and bruises, but Rai dropped to the ground instantly and moved like a shadow. Swift, silent, efficient. Her movements were so clean that the instructor paused for a moment, watching her glide through danger as if she'd done it in combat. By the halfway mark, the group began to slow. Some stumbled. Others gasped for breath. Aaron tripped over a log and cursed under his breath. Rai reached back, grabbed his hand, and pulled him up without breaking stride. "Keep moving," she said softly. He didn't ask how she still had strength. He just ran, trying to match her pace. Then came the climbing wall, 10 feet high, slick with mud. Cadets slipped and fell again and again. One shouted, "We can't do this." Rai didn't wait. She took 3 quick steps, jumped, grabbed the edge, and pulled herself over with one smooth motion. When she landed on the other side, the instructor blew his whistle. "Cadet Rai, back to the wall. Help the others." Without hesitation, she climbed back and started pulling people up one by one. She lifted exhausted cadets with strength far beyond her size. Her arms trembled, but her eyes stayed calm. Each person she helped looked at her differently after that. Not as a quiet girl, but as a leader. By the last leg, the sun was brutal. The field shimmered with heat. The medics stood ready near the sidelines. One cadet, a young boy named Neil, started to stumble. His face turned pale, his lips dry. He tried to keep running but collapsed face first into the dirt. Panic spread instantly. Some shouted for help, some froze. The instructor ran forward yelling, "Medic! Medic!" But Rai was already moving. She dropped beside Neil, checked his pulse, opened his airway, and began quick chest compressions. Her voice was calm and sharp. "Zoya, bring water. Ravi, take off his pack, now." The others obeyed without question. It was like she had taken command of the entire field. The medic arrived a minute later and blinked in shock. "Who trained you?" he asked, watching her stabilize the cadet like a professional. Rai didn't answer. She just kept working until Neil opened his eyes weakly. Only then did she exhale, sit back, and wipe the sweat from her forehead. The field went silent. Even the instructor didn't know what to say. He looked at her, eyes narrowing. "Cadet Rai," he said slowly, "that was not standard first aid." She looked up at him, expression unreadable. "I've done it before," she replied quietly. He tilted his head. "In training?" She paused, then said softly, "No, sir, in combat." Those words hit like thunder. No one spoke, even the birds seemed to stop. The instructor stared at her, then gave a slow nod. "Carry on," he said, finally turning away. But everyone there knew. Something about her was no longer a secret. Later that evening, the entire base was buzzing. "She said she was in combat." "How? She's just a cadet." No one gets that calm under pressure unless they've seen real danger. The whispers grew into stories. Some said she was a medic from the Marines. Some said she was part of a rescue unit that vanished in Afghanistan. Nobody knew what was true, but everyone felt the same thing. Respect that night as the base lights dimmed. Rai sat alone on the steps outside the dorm. The wind was cool, carrying faint sounds from the field. Aaron walked up quietly and sat beside her. He didn't say anything for a long time, then finally asked, "You really were in combat, weren't you?" She looked straight ahead and said softly, "Once." "Was it bad?" he asked. She nodded, eyes distant. "Bad enough to remember every second?" Aaron didn't ask more. He didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. She wasn't just training to learn. She was training to forget, to rebuild what war had taken from her, and from that night on, nobody called her Robot Girl anymore. They called her Iron because she was strong, unshakable, and real, but deep inside, Rai still felt the weight of what she'd lost, and soon, someone from her past would walk through those gates, calling her by a name she thought she had buried forever. Iron Wolf. The base was quiet that night. Too quiet. The wind moved softly through the flagpoles, making the metal ropes clink like old memories. Inside the command office, a single lamp glowed on a desk full of papers. Captain Neha sat there reading reports in silence. Her eyes stopped when she reached one file, name Rai A. Rank Cadet. Background confidential, she frowned. Confidential. No cadet file should ever be marked like that. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the table. Who are you, Rai? She whispered under her breath. That same day had been strange. Every instructor was talking about the incident during training. A cadet collapsing, Rai stepping in like a field medic. The way she gave commands, the way she stayed calm. Even the senior sergeant said quietly, that girl's seen real blood. And yet her record said nothing. No prior experience. No service number, no transfer history. Captain Neha opened her laptop. She typed a code that few officers even knew. Her clearance allowed her to peek deeper into restricted files. For a moment, the system paused. Then the screen flickered and a hidden folder appeared. Marked Classified, Marine Archive. Neha hesitated. Her finger hovered over the mouse. If she opened this, it meant breaking military protocol. But curiosity burned stronger than caution. She clicked. The first thing that appeared was a report. Operation Iron Veil, 2019. A blurred image loaded slowly. A unit of Marines standing beside a helicopter. Smoke in the background, and there she was. Rai younger, sharper, her uniform dirty but her eyes unbroken. Below the image were 3 words that made Neha's heart skip. Call sign Iron Wolf. Neha leaned back, whispering, Rai. Iron Wolf. Her mind raced. She'd heard that name before, every officer had. It was the code name of a Marine who had saved a squad of soldiers during an ambush. The report said she was wounded, presumed dead, but now she was here alive, quietly training as a cadet. Why? Neha printed the file and slipped it into a folder, locking it in her desk drawer. She couldn't tell anyone yet, not until she understood. The next morning, the camp buzzed as usual. Cadets lined up, instructors shouted, the sun climbed higher. Rai stood in formation, steady as always. But Neha's eyes found her from across the yard. She watched the way Rai's hands never shook. The way she scanned her surroundings like a soldier in hostile ground. Not a student, a survivor. During lunch, Neha approached her quietly. Cadet Rai, she said. Yes, ma'am, Rai replied, standing up instantly. At ease, Neha said softly. Walk with me. They moved away from the others, walking down the narrow path behind the barracks. For a while, neither spoke. Then Neha said carefully, You performed well yesterday. Thank you. Ma'am, you've had training before, haven't you? Rai's jaw tightened slightly. A little, ma'am. In the Marines? Neha asked, her tone calm but sharp. Rai froze. For a brief second, her calm mask cracked. Then she turned her head slightly, her eyes unreadable. Where did you hear that? She asked softly. Neha smiled faintly. I read a lot of files. You shouldn't have read that one, Rai said quietly. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. Neha stopped walking. You're the Iron Wolf, aren't you? Rai looked away, her eyes distant. That name doesn't exist anymore, ma'am. But it's you, Neha pressed. Why hide it? Why come here as a cadet? Rai took a deep breath. When you've seen men die in your arms, when you've lost your unit, when the medals don't matter anymore, you stop wanting to be called a hero. She looked down at her hands, scarred but steady. I came here to start again. Not to be remembered. Neha's heart softened. For a moment, she wasn't looking at a soldier. She was looking at someone who had carried too much pain in silence. Still, Neha said gently, you can't hide forever. Rai gave a faint smile. I've managed so far. That evening, Neha sat again in her office. Staring at Rai's file, she didn't know what to do. Officially, Rai was a cadet, but in truth, she was a war hero in disguise, someone who had every right to be leading. Not training. Suddenly the door opened. Sergeant Kapoor walked in, his face pale. Ma'am, he said quickly, you need to see this. He handed her a report during shooting practice that afternoon. Rai had scored 100% accuracy. Every bullet perfectly centered. No cadet had ever done that before, Kapoor whispered. I think she's dangerous. Neha looked at him sharply. She's not dangerous, Sergeant, she said. She's disciplined. After Kapoor left, Neha opened the drawer and looked at the photo again. Rai standing in front of a smoking battlefield, The Iron Wolf of 2019. A ghost from a war that no one had fully understood. She closed the drawer and whispered to herself. She's hiding from her past, but the past won't stop looking for her. And somewhere outside, under the night sky, Rai stood alone, looking at the flag that waved in the wind, her eyes heavy with memories. Her lips barely moved as she murmured, "Once a Marine, always a Marine." The sky was dark with thick clouds that morning. It wasn't raining, but the wind carried the smell of something heavy, something coming. The cadets gathered at the training yard, each of them in full gear. Today was the live fire simulation, a test meant to prepare them for real battlefield pressure. But no one was truly prepared for what would happen. Rai stood in line, silent as always, her rifle slung over her shoulder, her boots firm in the dirt. Beside her, Aaron fidgeted with his helmet, glancing nervously at the mock battlefield ahead. Burnt-out cars, sandbags, and towers filled the area. Hidden speakers would play gunfire sounds while remote turrets fired blanks. "Just keep your head down and move," Aaron whispered to her. Rai gave a small nod, her eyes locked on the field. She wasn't nervous. She looked like someone who'd seen a real battlefield before, because she had Captain Neha watched from the tower above. Arms crossed, eyes sharp. She still hadn't told anyone what she'd discovered in Rai's file. Not yet. She wanted to see something first. To know for sure, Squad 2, move out, came the call over the speakers. Rai's group moved in a tight line through the smoke and barriers. The sound of simulated gunfire began to echo all around them. Cadets ducked, shouted, scrambled for cover. It was chaos, even though they knew it wasn't real. And then, something went wrong. One of the towers sparked. A hidden turret exploded. The speakers began glitching and suddenly blasted a real flashbang sound. Boom. Smoke flooded the left side of the field, followed by a loud crack. The nearest cadets dropped. Stunned and coughing, Ravi screamed, holding his arm. Blood. Real blood. A fragment had pierced his sleeve. Panic spread like wildfire. Zoya froze in place, her eyes wide with fear. Aaron shouted, "This isn't part of the drill!" Instructors scrambled on the sidelines, shouting into radios, "Cut the system! Shut it down!" But inside the field, it was already a mess. Cadets ran in every direction, confused and blind. And right in the center of it all stood Rai, not moving, not panicking, assessing. In one sharp voice she shouted, "Form perimeter! Watch each angle!" No one reacted. "Now," she barked, her voice cutting through everything. That voice wasn't of a cadet, it was of a commander. Aaron dropped beside Ravi and tried to stop the bleeding. Rai knelt beside him, tore off part of her sleeve, and wrapped it tight. "He's stable," she said quickly. "We need to move him." "Where?" Zoya cried. "There." Rai pointed to a concrete shelter on the right. "Cover fire pattern. 3 seconds, we run." "Cover fire? With blanks?" Aaron asked. "Trust me," Rai said. And somehow they did. Rai counted 1, 2, 3. Then they ran. Carrying Ravi together, blanks fired overhead. But none of them flinched. Rai gave orders, signals, called positions. Everything like a real operation. Not once did she hesitate, not once did she forget. Because this wasn't training to her. This was memory. From the tower, Captain Neha stood frozen. She watched as Rai organized cadets, calmed the panic, treated wounds, cleared paths, all while smoke still filled the field. The instructors could barely react, because Rai had already taken command. Finally, the system was shut down. Lights turned red. An alarm rang across the field. "End simulation," the voice called. Medics rushed in, officers followed. Ravi was carried out conscious but weak. Other cadets limped out slowly, coughing, crying, shaken, but not Rai. She stood beside the concrete shelter, arms folded, checking everyone's status. When she saw Captain Neha walking toward her, she stood straight. "Damage report?" Rai asked before Neha could speak. Neha blinked, then smiled slightly. "You tell me." Rai looked over her team. "No serious injuries," she said. "Everyone's accounted for." Behind them, Sergeant Kapoor approached. He was pale, shaken by the chaos he'd witnessed. He looked at Rai like he was seeing her for the first time. "You knew exactly what to do," he said slowly. She didn't answer. Kapoor turned to Neha. "She's not just a cadet, is she?" Neha didn't reply. She just gave Rai a long, knowing look, then turned to the others. Everyone dismissed get medical checks. No exceptions. Rai began walking away, but Neha called after her. Rai! She stopped. Neha walked up close and said quietly, I know what today reminded you of. Rai nodded. The sounds, the fire, the smoke, it felt like the desert again. Neha whispered. You saved lives today, Iron Wolf. Rai closed her eyes. That's not my name anymore, she replied. Neha said, You may not want it, but it still belongs to you. Then she placed a hand on Rai's shoulder. Whatever you're running from, just know this. Heroes don't get to hide forever. Rai said nothing. She looked back at the field one last time, not as a cadet, but as a soldier who had led people through fire again. The sun was high, shining hot across the parade grounds. Cadets stood in formation, sweating through their uniforms, waiting for inspection. It was supposed to be a normal day, but something was different. Whispers moved through the lines like a quiet storm. Did you hear? A high-ranking Marine is visiting today. Someone from the old division, maybe even Special Forces. Why would someone like that come here? No one knew the reason, but eyes kept drifting toward the main gate. Rai stood in formation like always, still and silent. Her eyes forward, hands behind her back, boots perfectly aligned. But inside something felt wrong. A weight in her chest, a memory she couldn't name. As if her past had begun walking toward her. A black SUV rolled through the gate, tires crunching gravel. It stopped near the parade grounds, the doors opened. And out stepped a tall man in a clean, decorated uniform, dark sunglasses, silver hair, and a scar that ran from his temple to his cheek. He looked like someone who had seen war and lived to tell the story. Officers moved quickly to greet him. Captain Neha saluted. Welcome to Echo Base. Colonel? He nodded once, sharp and direct. I'm not here for a tour, Captain, he said, voice low and firm. I'm here for her. He looked past Neha, straight toward the formation. Straight toward Rai. She felt it before she saw it. That burning sensation in her spine, the kind of instinct that soldiers get only after they've been hunted before. She turned slowly. Her eyes met his in a heartbeat. Her breath caught. It was Colonel Harlan, the last surviving member of her old unit. The man she had pulled from the wreckage in Afghanistan. The one who used to call her by the name she had buried deep. He took one step forward. Then another, and then without hesitation, he cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted across the yard. Iron Wolf, stand by! The words echoed like thunder. Silence fell. Every cadet froze, heads turning, mouths open. Some gasped, some didn't understand. But Rai, she knew. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She dropped into a ready stance, arms firm, heels together. Eyes locked forward, not as a cadet but as a soldier, as Iron Wolf. Captain Neha turned sharply toward the colonel. Sir, what are you doing? He smiled, just a little. Waking up a legend. Cadet stared, unsure what was happening. Zoya whispered. What did he call her? Arun answered in shock. Iron Wolf. He said Iron Wolf. Rai stood frozen, her mind racing with flashes of war. Fire, broken buildings, radio calls. She remembered dragging Harlan out of the rubble. He was bleeding, barely conscious. And before he passed out, he had said, If I make it out of this, the world will know your name, Iron Wolf. Now he had returned, and the world was finally hearing it. Colonel Harlan walked up to her slowly. He removed his sunglasses and looked her in the eyes. You really thought you could disappear, didn't you? She didn't answer. He stepped closer. You saved my life, he said quietly. And now I'm here to return the favor. Rai finally spoke, her voice low. I didn't want them to know. They already know, he replied. They just didn't understand, until now. He turned to the crowd of cadets and officers. This woman, he said loudly, is not just another recruit. She served with the best, bled with the bravest, and led missions most of you will never hear about. She saved an entire unit when command left us for dead. She is Iron Wolf. The cadets looked at Rai with new eyes, no longer cold or curious, but full of shock, respect, and awe. Captain Neha walked to her side. You didn't tell them, she said softly. Rai shook her head. I wanted to earn everything again. Without the weight of my name. Neha nodded slowly. And you did. Aaron stepped forward from the line, then saluted one by one. The others followed, even the instructors. Even the ones who had laughed, doubted, or ignored her. They now stood with hands at their brows, eyes filled with silent apology. The colonel smiled. Looks like they know now. Rai looked at the field, at the faces, at the sky, and for the first time in years, she felt her heart beat without pain, not as a ghost, but as herself. Iron Wolf had returned, not by choice, but by honor. And honor never stays hidden for long. For a full minute, nobody moved. The sun beat down on the field, hot and bright, but the world felt frozen. Rai stood in front of her cadet squad, no longer the quiet girl in uniform, no longer robot girl, no longer a mystery. She was Iron Wolf, the name that once shook radios across deserts, the name whispered in the shadows of battlefield legends, now spoken out loud here in front of every cadet who had doubted her. Colonel Harlan had said the words they would never forget. She saved an entire unit. She is Iron Wolf, one by one. Cadets broke formation, but not to leave, to salute. Aaron stepped forward first. His hands shook as he raised his arm. It was not just a salute, it was an apology. A thank you, a sign of deep respect behind him. Zoya followed. Then Ravi, bandaged from the drill accident. He stood tall despite the pain. More cadets stepped out. And then the instructors too. Even Sergeant Kapoor, who once doubted her, now saluted with quiet shame in his eyes. Rai didn't speak, her face stayed still. But something behind her eyes softened. Not with pride, with release. As if a weight had finally started to fall away. She hadn't come here to be honored, she had come to hide, to rebuild. But now the truth stood in the open. Not in secret files or whispered rumors, but right here beneath the sky. Captain Neha stepped beside her and spoke to the crowd. Respect is not given because of medals or stories, she said. It is earned. Moment by moment. And Rai has earned every single salute today. The cadets nodded slowly. Many of them were speechless because now they remembered everything. The quiet discipline, the way she trained before dawn. How she helped them without expecting thanks. How she stayed calm when others panicked. They hadn't seen it before, but now it was clear. They had been walking beside a warrior all along that evening. Rai sat alone under the tree near the drill yard. The sun was setting. Painting the sky orange and gold, footsteps approached. And she didn't need to look to know who it was. It was Aaron. He sat beside her holding a tray of tea and 2 cups. I didn't know how to say sorry, he said quietly. She looked at the tea, then at him. You just did, she replied. He smiled, a little awkward. You know, he said, when I first met you, I thought you were cold. I wasn't, Rai said. I was just careful. He nodded slowly. Thank you for saving me, he said. She took a sip of tea and replied, You saved yourself. I just reminded you how. The next few days on base were different. People didn't stare at Rai anymore, they watched her. Not with suspicion, but with curiosity and respect. Some cadets asked her for tips, others just walked by and nodded. She still didn't talk much, but now, her silence felt like strength, not distance. Colonel Harlan met her again near the flagpole before leaving the base. I had to see you, he said. I'm not ready to come back, she told him. He nodded. I know, he said, but you're already back. Then he handed her a small patch. It was black, with a silver wolf head embroidered on it. Her old unit's insignia, I kept it, he said. I always hoped I'd get the chance to return it. She took the patch in her hands gently. Her fingers trembled for the first time in a long time. Thank you, she said. He stepped back, saluted her sharply. Iron Wolf dismissed. She smiled. Thank you, Colonel, and watched him drive away into the dust and light. Later that night, the dorm was quiet. Most cadets had gone to sleep. Rai stood by the window, holding the patch in one hand and her dog tags in the other. She looked at her reflection in the glass, no longer hiding, no longer just surviving. She was a soldier again, but this time not for war. For peace, for purpose. Captain Neha walked in softly. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Rai shook her head. Neha looked at the patch. You're going to wear it? Rai smiled. Not yet. Why not? Rai looked out the window and said, Because I want to earn it again. This time. With them, the next morning when roll call began, Rai stood in line just like everyone else. Same uniform, same boots, same posture, but now, every cadet around her stood a little straighter, because they weren't just standing next to a classmate, they were standing beside Iron Wolf. And every time they saluted her, it was not out of fear or duty. It was because they had learned what real strength looked like. It didn't come from shouting or showing off. It came from staying steady when the world burned, from choosing discipline over pride, and from walking through fire without asking for applause, and that was the salute that echoed. Not once, but forever. The wind was calm that morning. Not a storm, not heat, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something big has passed. Not silence, but peace. The training ground looked the same. Same flags, same dust, same rows of cadets. But something had changed in the air, something deeper, invisible but strong. Rai stood near the front line, hands behind her back, her boots planted firmly. No longer just part of the group now, she was their example. Their silent leader, everyone knew her name. But more than that, they understood her story. And still, she wore no medals still. She didn't ask for special rank or a private room. She lived like them, ate like them, trained with them by choice. Because respect meant more to her than rank. Captain Neha stood by the review post watching the formation. Beside her, a young officer handed her a folder. "Orders came in," he said. "They want Iron Wolf back on the active list." Neha opened the folder. Inside was a request from High Command. A field unit had asked for Rai by name. They needed someone who had seen war and still chose peace. Someone like her. Neha didn't smile, she just looked out at Rai. The same woman who had carried both silence and fire in her heart, and who now had to make a choice later that afternoon. Neha met Rai near the base garden. It was the quietest spot on camp. No drills, no shouting, just the sound of leaves and the soft buzz of wind. Neha handed her the folder. "They want you back," she said. Rai opened it slowly, read the words, then closed it. "I figured this would come," she whispered. "What will you do?" Neha asked. Rai looked at the flowers nearby, small, wild, growing between cracks of rock. "I'm not afraid to return," she said. "But I came here to heal, not to hide." Neha nodded. "And you have," she said. "But healing doesn't mean you stop moving." Rai looked at her, quiet for a long moment, then finally spoke. "There was a time I would have said yes without thinking. When orders came, I moved, no questions, but now, after all this..." She paused. "I think I finally understand why I came back." Neha waited. Rai looked at the sky and said, "I didn't come here to escape. I came here to teach them how to survive without becoming broken like I was." Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with truth. "The battlefield is not just out there," she said, pointing beyond the gates. "It's in here too," she tapped her chest, "in the mind, in the memory." Neha placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "They'll listen to you now," she said. Rai gave a small smile. They already were. Even before they knew who I was that evening, Rai stood in front of the cadets, not in line, but at the front. They had asked her to speak, not as a hero, but as one of them. She looked at their faces, young and uncertain, just like hers had once been. Then she spoke slowly. "When I came here, I wore the same uniform as you, but I carried more than gear. I carried pain, silence, guilt." They listened quietly, eyes fixed on her. "I didn't tell anyone who I was," she said, "because I didn't want respect for something I did in the past. I wanted to earn it again." She paused, took a breath. "You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to be famous to be brave. And you don't need medals to matter." One cadet asked gently, "Why didn't you let them honor you sooner?" Rai looked down for a moment, then replied, "Because I needed to forgive myself first." There was silence again. But this time it wasn't awkward, it was sacred. Like a truth had just landed on every heart in the room. After the gathering, Aaron approached her. "So," he said, "will you go back?" She looked at the folder in her hand, then at the cadets laughing, training, living, and said, "Not yet. But if they need you?" he asked. Rai smiled and answered, "I'm always ready." And that was the truth. She didn't need to wear the patch or carry the title, because she had already become what every soldier should be. steady, humble, strong, and awake. That night, Rai pinned the silver wolf patch to the inside of her uniform. Not on her shoulder but close to her heart, because legends don't always lead from the front. Sometimes they stand beside you, silent and strong, training you, guiding you, until the day you become strong enough to lead your own fight. And that is what Rai did, quietly, patiently, with the soul of a warrior, and the heart of a teacher. Her name was Rai, but to those who truly knew her, she would always be Iron Wolf.